Greetings to you today and welcome to our daily Devo for Friday, the 26th of July today. If it looks a little dark around me today, that's because they're working on power lines out front of the house, or on our whole block basically, and we are without power at this present time, but my trusty old phone still works by battery. So we'll record this and upload it later when we get some electricity back over here. Today's devotion is entitled Dreams, and it comes from the Charles Dickens work entitled The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby. The cold, feeble dawn of a January morning was stealing in at the windows of the common sleeping room when Nicholas, raising himself on his arm, looked among the prostrate forms which on every side surrounded him, as though in search of some particular object. As they lay closely packed together, covered for warmth's sake, little could be distinguished but the sharp outlines of pale faces. There were some who, lying on their backs with upturned faces and clenched hands just visible in the leaden light, bore more the aspect of dead bodies than of living creatures. And there were others coiled up into the strange and fantastic postures, such as might have been taken for the uneasy efforts of pain to gain some temporary relief, rather than the freaks of slumber. A few, and these were among the youngest of the children, slept peacefully on, with smiles upon their faces, dreaming perhaps of home, but ever and again a deep and heavy sigh, breaking the stillness of the room, announced that some new sleeper had awakened to another day. And as morning took the place of night, the smiles gradually faded away, and the friendly darkness which had given them birth. Dreams are the bright creatures of poem and legend, who sport on earth in the night season and melt away in the first beam of the sun, which lights grim care and stern reality on their daily pilgrimage through the world. An unusual scene there. Again, we depend on Gene Fisher to help us out with setting the scene for us here. In this passage, Dickens portrays dreams as things that melt away in the first beam of the sun. And that is my experience, I would say. But our dreams do not have to end at sunrise. Harriet Tubman, a former slave turned abolitionist, said, quote, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars, to change the world." I like that quote. The Bible tells the story of a dreamer named Joseph. He was a teenager, the youngest of his siblings, when he had a dream. Joseph told his brothers, quote, "We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." Genesis 37, verses 6 and 7. Joseph's brothers, as you might imagine, Joseph's brothers did not like the idea of bowing to their younger brother. They hated Joseph for his dream, and they sold him into slavery. And still, Joseph believed that God had something great in store for him. After many trials and much patience, Joseph's dream came true. He became the chief minister, like the governor of Egypt in Genesis 41 to 46. God has a plan for each and every one of us. Often he instills dreams or ambitions in our hearts and encourages us to reach for them. And whatever dream God puts into your heart, you can trust him to lead you to it. Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 23. O Lord, I know the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man who walks to direct his own steps. Jeremiah the prophet basically realizes unless God implants that dream, implants that vision in us, we're not going to those kinds of places. We're not accomplishing that kind of thing. The way of man is not in himself. Interesting statement of faith on Jeremiah's part. Dreams are something that I think that word gets used in different settings. I dreamt last night, and then we described some strange, unconnected, weird thing. And then others, like as Martin Luther King Jr. said, I have a dream, and it was a powerful one about racial unity, about coming together across the color barrier of the 60s, and still even today, it really has not gone away. But that's a great dream. He lived for that dream. He worked for that dream. And he died for that dream. The same is true with many missionaries down through the years. Right now I think of those 5 who were killed down in South America. They had a dream of reaching these people for Christ, of beginning to create a connection with them by dropping food in a basket as they would fly over in a plane and circle it. So they got so good at it, that bucket stayed pretty stationary, and they would come and they would take things out and then disappear until they felt safe landing, and they felt as though they could communicate in one way or another with these people, only to be murdered by them. What they didn't realize was the whole dream, I think, that God had. Surely they didn't. Their families will go back in. Their wives and children will go back in and reach these people. Eventually, the son of one of those dead missionaries will baptize one of the men who killed his father. Will witness to him, will lead him to faith in Christ, and he'll be considered grandfather. It's an incredible story. God has dreams for us that we cannot get our heads around unless we take the steps in that direction, unless we allow him. The steps of the righteous are ordered by the Lord, and that's where our faith has to be. In these dreams and this vision that God has for us, his people, it takes faith to follow it. It takes faith to stay with it. But the reward, the payoff, as it were, is souls won for Christ. And a growing of that group in heaven, people from every tribe, tongue, people, and nation who sing praises to the Lamb who was slain. Dreams. We should ask ourselves, what's my dream in life? Is it a selfish thing? Is to have a nice house and a nice car and a good job? The good job pays for the other stuff, right? Or is it to help people? To help them get out of the nightmare that they live, either in poverty or drugs or spousal abuse or whatever the case may be. That's what Jesus came to do. He came to seek and to save the lost. That's what our dream ought to be as well, to do all that we can for others, not to think of ourselves more highly than we ought to think of ourselves. Instead of having a selfish dream, to have a selfless dream. Let's ask the Lord for that. In our praying, in our dreaming, say, Lord, show me what you want. Help me to remember it when I wake up in the morning. Help me to pursue it. Blessings to you today.